We're here for our, I think, 6th WASH Canada Talks. And today it's my pleasure to introduce to everyone Dr. Elijah Bisung. He is an assistant professor at the School of Kinesiology and Health Studies at Queen's University, and is going to give us a talk on measuring empowerment and intra-household decision-making in the WASH sector. But I'll let Elijah, I'll let you take it away, and if you have any other details to share on the intro, I'll let you do the honors.
That's fine. Thank you for the introduction, and thank you for organizing this. It's such a wonderful idea and forum for us to share ideas. So today I'm going to talk about measuring empowerment and intra-household decision making. It's a pilot project that we've been doing in Ghana and in Burkina Faso, and I thought it would be interesting to share some of our initial results. And this team, I know, also aligns perfectly with some of the previous speakers, especially what Susan earlier bit, my supervisor. So no wonder things are quite similar in that direction. So I would, as I talk, if you have questions, you can ask, put them in the chat. So in terms of outline, I'm just going to give a brief background to the research project, what we've sought out to do, and then introduce the research agenda, and then give 2 different case studies. So one is on how to measure intra-household decision making, why that is important, and then the second is on empowerment, which is more broader, and then finish with some policy implications of the work. 3 years ago on World Day, it was all about gender equality and empowerment, and the idea that we might not be able to achieve the sustainable development goals if we don't pay attention to inequities within the water and sanitation sector. And I'm not going to go into details about this because other speakers have spoken about it. And the UN Women also made a strong case that in order for us to achieve transformational WASH outcomes, we shouldn't just focus on toilets and taps, right? We shouldn't just focus on the infrastructure, but also we must be bold enough to enable women's voice, their choice, their agency, largely touching on what we'll call empowerment, to put it in a much simpler sense. But empowerment is not a very straightforward concept. It is multidimensional, and our work has also shown that it is context specific. Sometimes what you might consider empowerment in one cultural context or in one country might be conceived differently in another country or context. And when we focus on facilities, we are not, or households, just as our unit of measurement, we are not able to capture the complexities of empowerment. So when we focus on facility, most of the times we simply say, okay, this number of people in the community or a region have access to safe water or sanitation. That doesn't really tell us much in terms of social inequities within that particular community or region. So it is really very important to dig deep to see some of the outcomes that are associated with providing people with taps or with toilets. So we sought out to create what we call the Empowerment in WASH Index as a tool to measure empowerment in the water and sanitation sector. And the initial work was funded by Rich Oxford through the Department of Foreign Affairs in the UK. And the work happened in Ghana and Burkina Faso. I'll get into details about that shortly. But we have three main ideas. First, to develop indicators to better understand the relationship between empowerment, particularly women's empowerment, and WASH-related outcomes. And also develop concrete tools that policymakers and programmers can use to measure gender outcomes. So we've often heard that if you provide safe water closer to their homes, it will lead to women having more time to engage in leisure activities, to engage in economic activities. More girls will stay in schools. How do we monitor these gender outcomes? And of course, our aim is just to provide data to be able to both tell stories and provide evidence for policymakers to take actions. So the study sites were Esutify North in Ghana and Bonfara in Burkina Faso. And we chose it because we're working with an NGO called RRC WASH. It's a Dutch-based international NGO that focuses on water and sanitation. And they already had interventions going on in these two sites. So it was pretty easy for us and straightforward to partner with them so that we would leverage on their connections and community partners to be able to carry out the project. Now, so our first task in terms of methodology was to do consultation to understand what empowerment means in these two contexts. As I said, empowerment can be context specific. So what might be considered empowerment in Ghana might not be the same in Burkina Faso. So we did stakeholder concept mapping and workshops, both at the district level, so in those specific communities, and at the national level. These are just pictures of one of the district level consultation workshops in Ghana. So we brought together diverse groups within the state district. Some of them are chiefs, some are youth leaders, women group leaders, and we basically asked them what empowerment is, right? And we use concept mapping. I wouldn't go into details to come out to generate the dimensions of empowerment in these two localities. So after we did the district level concept mapping, we took the findings and presented them to national level stakeholders. So mostly NGOs, ministries, and government planners to say, well, at the district level, this is what empowerment looks like. Does it make sense? And then they also gave inputs into what we found so that we come up with the indicators and dimensions of empowerment. And these are just some of the pictures. So we use that to we use findings from the concept mapping to come out with 12 dimensions of empowerment, which I will get to quite briefly. And then we did a survey of 30 households in each of these study sites. And in each household, we will administer the same set of questions to the primary decision maker, that is a woman, and the primary decision maker, that is a man within the household. So of course, we didn't deal with single person household because we're interested in trying to look at levels within the same household. So comparing the man and a woman within the same households. And we use mobile technology to administer the questions and then the analysis. Before I get into empowerment, one key thing that emerged even from the preliminary analysis was the issue of decision making, using decision making as an indicator of empowerment, which I'm sure many of you would have found in perhaps social science or health or literature, when we simply use participation in decision making, perhaps at the household level, as an indicator of empowerment, with the assumption that one type of decision making is more empowering than the other, right? So let's say sole or joint decision making is more empowering. And in most surveys in LMICs, people tend to use joint decision making. So if the woman and the man within the same household jointly decide to do something, then they consider the woman to be more empowered than, for example, if the man goes ahead to take the decision alone. What is problematic is that there's simply no evidence to show the conditions under which having a say or not having a say can be regarded to be empowering, right? For example, do we consider a woman more empowered if she solely decides on the water source to use for the entire household, that is taking the decision alone? Or she's more empowered if she jointly decides with her husband, joint decision making? Or she's more empowered if she decides not to decide, right? I'm simply not interested. Don't bother me with decisions about water, right? Or are the internal or external motivations for these decisions the largest determinant of empowerment? So if there are other policies or rules within the community that exerts influence on the woman to decide or to decide not to decide, is that more empowering? These are not very straightforward answers, but in most surveys, we just tend to use joint decision making. So just focusing on only decision making, we're interested in examining patterns of autonomy in decision making related to 3 dimensions of water and sanitation. So water collection, water expenditure, and planning. So water collection decision making related to who to collect water in the household, for example. Then expenditure related to daily purchases or recurrent purchases. And planning was in terms of just participation at the household level, deciding who to go and participate in community activities around water and sanitation. And we're also interested in jointness in decision making across these 3 dimensions. Finally, agreement regarding decision making. So sometimes the woman can perhaps say they took the decision alone, but then if we interview the man separately, the man will tell you it was a joint decision. Or it could be the other way around. So we're also interested in seeing the level of agreement. That is when the woman says she took the decision alone. If we interview the man will agree that, oh, okay, I had no input into the decision making. It was solely the woman who took the decision. So we're interested in these household dynamics. So we use the social determination theory. I'm sure most or some of you would have come across it in psychology or in health, to look at the extent to which motivations to take this decision was either internally motivated or externally motivated. And the social determination theory suggests that types of motivations differ based on the degree to which they are either autonomously regulated or externally regulated. And this is just a figure that is often used to explain. So the intrinsic motivations are those that are self-motivated or autonomous, right? And we regard those people perhaps to be more empowered. That is, So the person enjoys taking the decision, gets inherent satisfaction in taking a decision and goes ahead to take it. So the woman enjoys doing something and then goes ahead to do it, and the same for the man. So we regard such people to be internally motivated, compared to the very far left, external regulation, where there's an external force, right, that uses either rewards or punishments or reprisals to motivate someone to engage in the activity. And basically, you can use this continuum to create what is often called the RAI, right? And that is the relative autonomy index, which ranges from -9 to +9, with +9 being the person being autonomously regulated, and then -9 means there's an external influence. So we just use it to try to see whether women were more external influence to take those decisions than men. So in the survey, we just use these 3 questions to capture the degree to which people were externally or internally motivated. So I'll just read the first one. So Ama or Kofi. So these are local names in the case study settings. Ama or Kofi collects water because his or a spouse or another person or group in the community tells them that they must. He or she does what they tell her to do. So this is external, right? Somebody outside the household is telling you that you should collect water and then you do it. Compared to the last question, which is intrinsic motivation. Amma chooses to collect water because she thinks it is best for her family and business. If she changes her mind about who should collect water, then she could act differently. This is self-motivated. So I think it is good for me. I would do it. If I think it is bad, I'll do otherwise. I'll change. So we use that to calculate the relative autonomy index. And on this table, that's just what I'm going to focus on. And as I said, positive figures mean that people are autonomously regulated, and then negative means that they're externally motivated. Both men and women indeed were autonomously motivated, but then at various different levels, right? So you can see for water collection, for example, women were more autonomously motivated than men. So when it comes to water collection, women think that they are self-motivated to do it compared to men. Then sanitation expenditure, the issue making about sanitation expenditure is the other way around, which means that motivation to take part in what decision is not uniform. We have to look at the domain in which the motivation is taking place. Then we also try to look at agreement in decision making. As I initially said, jointness in decision making, because it's not a very straightforward task. So we ask each participant whether when decisions are made regarding the domain, that is either water collection or sanitation expenditure, who is it that normally takes the decision? Then there were a couple of responses, and we just grouped the responses into 3: sole decision, joint decision, or no inputs at all. And then with regards to input into decision making related to sanitation expenditure, you would find that more women had no input at all, right? So more women reported that they didn't take part in decision making about sanitation expenditure, and then only a few of them had sole input, and then a few of them also had joint input. So across all domains, men were more likely to, across the sanitation expenditure domain, men were more likely to take part in joint decision or to take the decision alone. Then you find very similar graph when it comes to input into decision making regarding participation in water and sanitation activities at the community level. But interestingly, when it comes to water collection, is the other way around. Men reported no input into decision making compared to women. So as I said, the domain matters a lot. Things are not uniform. Then we also try to look at level of agreement. That is when the woman perhaps says they took the decision alone, that is sole input into decision making. Does the man also feel the same way, that actually the woman took the decision alone? So on your left are the level of agreement. That is the woman saying they took sole decision and the man saying, okay, yeah, the woman took sole decision. Then to the right is disagreement. Straight away, you see that people are more likely to disagree when it comes to their level of input into decision making compared to level of agreement, particularly in water collection and sanitation expenditure. And sometimes the disagreement can be huge. So for example, let's take sanitation expenditure, and let's take no input into decision making. So 39% of women reported no input into decision making, and 19% of men reported no input into decision making. And if we just take that alone, then you say, oh, these are the figures. But these are level of disagreements. So for 39% of women who said they did not take part in decision making, the men felt otherwise. Either the men felt the woman took part jointly, or even the woman took the decision alone, right? And it's the same thing for all of them. So in surveys, when we just take responses from only the woman or the man, we might not be capturing the complexities that happen within the household. However, we should also be careful about some of these responses, because sometimes sole input in itself might look like, oh, it's empowering, the woman is allowed to take the decision alone. But perhaps it will be because the man is irresponsible. The woman prefers consensus building, but the man is simply not into it. So if we ask the woman say, oh, so I take the decision alone, and we take that response, it might mean a whole lot of things. And sometimes too, circumstances make people feel they prefer something even when they don't prefer it, right? So if certain cultural norms are so entrenched that a man or a woman will feel that it is just their obligation, it is good to even do this particular thing, let's say collect water, such that they don't even understand the motivations behind it, because that is just the thing everyone does. So understanding these things are very, very important, as we've realized in our own research. And then in the general project about empowerment in general, of course, quite intuitively, women were more likely to be disempowered. But across the 12 domains which I cannot show today. There are some domains you find that men are disempowered in them, and then there are some of them you find that women are more disempowered in those domains. So we're almost in the 30-minute mark. If there are questions, I would like to take them.
Do you want to? Sorry, I missed. Do you still have more?
Yeah, I have a couple of slides. So it's into two parts. So I've just finished the first part. So if there are questions, we could talk about them, or if there are no questions, I can present the other part as well.
I have a curiosity. I mean, I'm guess it's my excuses, my lame excuses. I'll start off the phrase by saying, as an engineer, because this is new to me, or at least not in our day-to-day. We think of gender, but I know in engineering maybe we don't do as deep a dive, but even thinking in terms of the WASH Empowerment Index, I think you mentioned of course I can see why it's context specific, and as in geographically it will probably be very different.
Yeah.
And how do they, if it's that, how do you compare between, like, say, oh, this place is more empowered if they're using different metrics, or do you see it as something that is comparable, or it shouldn't be compared?
Right. That's a very good question. So when we did the concept mapping in both countries to come up with the domains, we realized some domains were very similar between Ghana and Burkina Faso. So socio-cultural norms, issues of affordability, access to information around water and sanitation. And some were less similar, and some were totally different. So let's say Ghana is a major domain, but in Burkina Faso, it's not a major domain. So you could actually do cross-cultural validation to see which of the domains cut across multiple cultural contexts. And then in that sense, if you are interested in comparison, which is important, you can go ahead and do comparison of empowerment outcomes across different cultural contexts, while still taking note of contextual differences.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Any other questions, or I think if you want, you can.
Okay. Yeah. So I'll just continue from this slide with the empowerment in WASH index. And as I said, the aim was to develop a tool that you can use to monitor empowerment outcomes during water interventions. So if you were to provide water facility or sanitation facility in a community, and your intention is that it should generate some form of empowerment for women, what tools can we use to say that yes, you are achieving your goals, or you are not achieving your goals? That was the whole purpose of the broader project. And after we did the concept mapping to come up with the domains, these are the domains that came up, and the domains can be grouped into 3 levels. So empowerment, as we saw, it was not only multi-dimensional, but it was multi-level as well. You can operationalize it across different levels. So at the individual level, at the household level, and at the community level. And what are some of the indicators that came up? So at the individual levels, people were talking about the ability to make personal decisions about water expenditure, water usage, and the management of water. So some of the domains I earlier gave to talk about the decision making. And then self-motivation. Then at the household level, indicators that came up included input into decision making at the household level, control over household assets, that is household water and sanitation assets. So control over the tap, over the toilet facility to use it the way you want, basically. Then work-life balance, which was tied to time people spend collecting water. Then also access to and sharing of information about water practices, and then input into decisions about water rules, so who is responsible for what. So at the household level, these were some of the indicators people felt were important if we wanted to look at empowerment outcomes. Then at the community level, people talk about group membership, right? So if there were water and sanitation groups within the community, whether they had the ability to join these groups and whether they had the ability to take leadership positions within the groups. And then people also talked about institutions being accountable. So water and sanitation institutions within the community being accountable, and also access to and sharing of information about water and sanitation rights and responsibilities. And people felt very strongly about this. Especially in Burkina Faso, they were able to articulate water as a human right at that level, and were very much interested in service providers and government taking responsibility for that. So one of the things they advanced was that if they're able to get enough information regarding how they can lobby or put pressure on government to fulfill that right, then they will feel they are empowered. Right. So these were the various indicators of empowerment that we found. And then we conducted a survey, again, administered to both men and women within the same household, using those indicators. So we had a bunch of questions under each of those indicators, and we use the indicators to create level of disempowerment for both men and women. So the graph to your right is for Ghana, and the one to your left is for Ghana, and the one to your right is for Burkina Faso. And the taller the graph, the more disempowered the group is. So in both countries, women were more likely to be disempowered than men. And the various colors represents the 12 indicators. And the larger the color within the bar means it contributes a lot to disempowerment. So for example, in the Burkina Faso women graph, the one to your extreme right, you'll find input into decision-making. The green one contributes input into decision-making about involvement in community water and sanitation activities, contribute a lot to women disempowerment. So meaning they don't make a lot of inputs when it comes to involvement in community water and sanitation activities. And if we go to the Ghana graph, the one to the left for women is very similar, but then the yellow color also seems big for women in Ghana, which is input into decision making about what expenditures. So women were less likely to make input into decision making about water and sanitation expenditures, which was contributing a lot to their disempowerment. And for men, it was input into decision making about water and sanitation roles and responsibilities that was contributing a lot to their disempowerment. So men feeling that they don't contribute a lot when it comes to decision making about who should take what role or who should do what within the household when it comes to water and sanitation. These are simply the same charts in the form of a bar chart to clearly show what contributes more to this empowerment for women. So as I said, in Ghana, it is input into decision making about involvement in community water and sanitation activities. And then if you go to Burkina Faso, input into decision making about roles and responsibilities, and work-life balance contributes a lot to this empowerment. So we engage with a couple of NGOs in both countries to kind of create these tools, and they are simply using them to monitor change under water and sanitation empowerment, water and sanitation interventions. So in Asutifi North, for instance, that's in Ghana, the district is chosen as a model district to demonstrate how achievable the water and sanitation SDG target is. So there's a lot of investments within the district by different NGOs and by government to see whether it is really feasible to achieve universal access by 2030. So they are alongside deploying massive water and sanitation infrastructure in the district, they are using these tools to monitor change in women's empowerment over time. And we are working with SMAVI in Bangladesh and in Uganda as well, and they are using it as a diagnostics tool, right? So they are using it to identify different areas. So basically, you can look at the different domains and indicators I presented. So you can use the tool, administer it, and then try to do your analysis to see which areas are women more disempowered, so that your interventions can target them. So some NGOs are using the tool in that respect to diagnose where to focus their attention on. And we also feel at the end of the day, you could actually use it to also evaluate effectiveness of different approaches. Either there are approaches to deploying interventions, or there are even approaches when it comes to government policy. So which policy yields the greatest impact when it comes to women's empowerment in water and sanitation. And we started this work in 2019, so it's still quite new. It hasn't been applied in a lot of contexts, but then there's a lot of interest, especially from the NGO sector, to use it in their day-to-day operations. I would end by acknowledging some members of the research team. So this work is in partnership with colleagues at Stockholm Environment Institute. And as I said, RC is one of the NGOs that we initially partnered with in Ghana and Burkina Faso. And we've received funding from SHEC as well, and the initial funding from DFID to do this work. Thank you.
That's awesome. We thank you. This is great. I was making notes here and